right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today, we're going deep, way back to 19th century England, trying to uncover the life of one Jane Shone.
A fascinating era, no doubt.
Full of history, for sure. And you know what makes this even more intriguing? Our main source is an excerpt from a book written by, get this, her fifth great-grandson, Paul Elms Bacardi.
Oh, wow, a direct descendant.
Yeah, so we're getting, maybe some family secrets, passed down stories, those little details you wouldn't find just anywhere.
I see, a very personal perspective then.
Exactly. But before we get into Jane's story, let's set the stage. Imagine rural England, late 1700s, early 1800s. Life was so different then.
Oh, absolutely. Slower pace, close-knit communities.
Almost idyllic, wouldn't you say?
In some ways, perhaps. But we must remember, rural life back then had its own unique set of hardships, particularly for women.
Right, of course, limited opportunities and all that. It wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Not at all.
So it's in this world that Jane enters the picture. Born in 1792 in Chorlton, Cheshire, daughter of Matthew Shone and Mary Sudlow.
A farming family.
Yeah, pretty typical for the time, I'd imagine.
Very much so. But what's interesting about Jane, even as a young girl, she didn't quite fit the mold.
We mean?
Well, the book describes her as having this sharp wit.
Yeah, I like that. A sharp wit. Not so common for women in that era.
Not at all. It was quite unusual.
Are there any stories, anything that really shows this side of her?
There's one, an incident mentioned. A visiting nobleman, you see, tried to be a bit condescending about farming folk.
Oh.
Jane, barely a teenager then, she retorts with this witty observation, left the nobleman speechless, everyone else roaring with laughter.
Haha. I bet he never came back to Chorlton.
The book says he avoided it on his travels after that, so...
Oh, she sounds like she could hold her own. But it wasn't just her wit. The book does go on about her looks.
She was said to have fiery red hair and these captivating blue eyes.
Oh, I can picture it.
But there's this line, this description I think captures her even better.
Really? What does it say?
Her mother, Mary, often said that Jane carried the spirit of the changing seasons in her. Radiant like the summer sun, yet wistful like the autumn wind.
Wow, that's beautiful. So much more than just a pretty girl, right?
Exactly. This inner depth, this complexity.
It makes you wonder, what were her days actually like growing up in Chorlton?
Well, we have to remember, children contributed to family life from a young age back then. So chores, helping on the farm, all that.
Right. No time for daydreaming.
But even then, the book hints that Jane, she always found ways to bring her own spirit to it all.
In what way?
She loved storytelling, would entertain her siblings with these fantastical tales while they worked, weaving stories about the village, the people.
Oh, that's lovely. I can picture it.
I know, right? Makes her come alive.
So this Jane, the storyteller, the witty observer, how does Samuel, the miller, enter the picture?
Well, it seems their first encounter was at the annual summer fair. A big tradition brought folks from all the surrounding villages together.
Ah, but that was exciting. Music, laughter, everyone dressed up.
Exactly, a rare social gathering.
And amidst all that, they meet. I can't help but imagine this, eyes meeting across a crowded room kind of moment.
Well, the book doesn't quite give us all those romantic details, but it emphasizes their courtship was a slow burn.
Oh, why is that?
Samuel was a miller, traveled a lot for his trade, so their connection, it deepened through letters exchanged over many months.
Ah, so the anticipation, the longing.
Precisely. Those letters are like a window into their personalities, you see.
I'd love to read those. Imagine what they reveal.
I know, right? Sadly, we only get glimpses. Jane's letters, they're described as poetic and insightful, clearly a way with words.
As we expect.
Whereas Samuel, his were more grounded, practical, optimistic, reflecting his nature.
Interesting. Such different personalities, but drawn to each other.
Opposites attract, perhaps?
Maybe. So after months of letters and longing glances at the yearly fair, they finally tie the knot.
They do. The book describes a quaint ceremony in 1814, a small chapel just outside Chorlton.
Quaint. I love it. It just fits, doesn't it?
It does. But marriage back then, especially for women in rural communities, it wasn't exactly a fairy tale.
Right. Very different expectations. So what was in store for Jane as she went from Jane Shone to Jane Dutton, the miller's wife?
Life was largely confined to the home, managing the household, caring for children, tending to her husband. These were the primary duties expected of her.
And with Samuel away for work, I bet her responsibilities were even greater.
Absolutely. She became the anchor of the family, in a way.
Holding it all together. But knowing Jane, I bet she didn't just, conform.
You're right. The book makes it clear she brought her own intelligence and compassion to everything. And in 1817, a new challenge, and joy arrived. The birth of her daughter, Bathsheba.
Bathsheba. No, that's a strong name, biblical, right?
It is, known for her beauty and strength.
Makes you wonder if Jane already saw those qualities in her newborn daughter.
It's certainly possible. And get this, Jane took a step that was quite unusual for the time. She decided to teach Bathsheba to read and write herself.
Wow, that's incredible. Literacy wasn't exactly encouraged for women back then.
Not at all. It was quite rare. This decision speaks volumes about Jane's forward-thinking nature, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like she saw education as key to a better future for her daughter, breaking free from those traditional limitations.
Exactly. And that decision, that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We left off with Jane, quite boldly, deciding to teach her daughter Bathsheba how to read and write.
I'm still thinking about that. It's such a powerful image, a mother in that era giving her daughter such a valuable tool.
It was rare, absolutely, but literacy, it wasn't just about, say, reading stories.
Right, more than that.
It was about accessing knowledge, being able to communicate, having a voice in a society that often, well, silenced women.
It makes me wonder, what did they talk about? What books did they read? Anything like that mentioned?
Sadly, no specifics given. But
Okay.
we do know Jane had a love for poetry.
Oh, really?
Yes, and she instilled that love in Bathsheba, so poetry likely played a part in their lessons. I love that. It adds this whole other layer, doesn't it? Not just, dry facts, but the beauty of language.
Exactly. Jane wasn't just teaching, she was nurturing her daughter's imagination.
Cultivating a curious mind.
Yes, precisely. But speaking of curious minds, I'm curious about Bathsheba herself.
Me too. We know she inherited her mother's looks, but also, apparently, her father's calmer temperament.
A good mix, perhaps.
What kind of woman did she become?
The book doesn't go into too much detail, sadly, but we do get the sense she was strong, capable, shaped by her mother's values.
I see. Any specific descriptions?
It describes her as having this quiet strength.
Oh, I like that. Quiet strength. It fits, doesn't it?
It does, a blend of Jane's spirit and Samuel's grounded nature.
And their influence, it went beyond just their family, right? We mentioned Jane becoming a respected figure in the whole community.
She did, and it wasn't through, say, wealth or status.
Right, so how did that happen?
Through her actions, her compassion, willingness to, step outside her expected role.
Can you give an example?
She was known for her knowledge of herbal remedies.
Herbal remedies. Interesting. Was that common back then?
It was a practice often passed down through families, but Jane seems to have had a knack for it.
What do you mean?
She'd gather herbs, plants from the countryside, made remedies for, everything from colds to more serious ailments.
Well, like the village healer. I bet people came from all over.
It's quite likely. She had this connection to nature, understanding its healing properties.
And it wasn't just that, was it? Wasn't she known for her generosity, too?
Very much so. Especially in tough times. If a family was struggling, she was there to help. Food, clothing, a listening ear.
It's like she created this ripple effect of kindness, reaching beyond her own home.
And that, I think, is at the heart of her legacy. She was resilient, compassionate, a lover of learning.
And fiercely devoted to her family and community.
Exactly. And it's through Bathsheba and those who came after that this legacy lived on.
It makes you think, did Bathsheba follow in her footsteps? Teaching her own children, carrying on the herbal remedies.
Sadly, the book doesn't say. But it stresses that Jane's impact, it was most strongly felt by Bathsheba.
That bond between mother and daughter.
A lineage of strong women, each generation learning from the last.
And that's the power of these personal stories. Jane's life, it might seem ordinary, but it had this ripple effect.
Her influence, her actions, they resonated long after she was gone.
And even though we might not know the full extent of it,
We can appreciate this glimpse we have, a reminder that even in, the simplest settings, one person can make a difference.
sometimes the quiet heroes, like Jane, are the ones with the most powerful lessons.
Absolutely. But all good things must end. What does the book tell us about Jane's later years and her passing? It really is something, isn't it? How one life can leave such a lasting mark.
But we're talking about Jane, and she wasn't exactly what you'd call ordinary.
Oh, far from it. Her influence, it went beyond just the family, became woven into the very fabric of Tarleton.
Really? In what way?
Well, she was more than just, respected. She was a catalyst for change, I'd say.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Catalyst for change. How so?
It was her forward-thinking nature, that decision to educate Bathsheba. That's what sparked something.
Ah, you're right. Teaching her to read and write, that was bold. Did it catch on? Did other families follow suit?
It's hard to say for sure. The book doesn't, give us names and numbers.
Right, of course.
But it does mention something interesting. After Bathsheba, more and more girls started attending the village school.
Oh, wow. So maybe not a direct link, but
But it's hard to imagine Jane's example didn't play a part.
it's like she planted this seed and it started to grow.
Exactly. And her influence, it went beyond just formal education, too. It was in the social fabric of Chorlton. She brought people together, fostered this sense of shared purpose, mutual support.
I can almost picture it. Long winter evenings, everyone gathered at her cottage sharing stories.
Oh, I bet there were some good ones.
And some of that famous herbal tea, perhaps.
Maybe. But the point is, she created this space
Yeah.
where people felt valued, connected.
And that's so important, isn't it? Especially in those rural communities where isolation was common.
Absolutely. It makes you think, without even realizing it, was she laying the groundwork for something bigger, a more equitable society?
You mean where women had a voice, education was valued?
Exactly. A strong community, able to, weather any storm.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
So while she might not have set out to change the world,
Her actions clearly had a transformative effect on her little corner of it.
it's proof that those individual choices, they matter. Living with purpose, intention.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into Jane Shone's life,
It's amazing, isn't it? A woman in that time facing those limitations, but creating a legacy that lived on.
her story, it's a reminder. True greatness, it doesn't always come with fanfare and recognition.
Right, not those big, loud moments.
It's in the quiet corners of life. The everyday acts of kindness, courage, love, that's what shapes the world.
And it's those seemingly ordinary lives, like Jane's.
That often hold the most extraordinary lessons.
Yeah, we might not all be in the history books.
But we each have the power to make a difference. Create a ripple effect.
And who knows, maybe centuries from now,
Someone will be looking back at our lives, piecing together the stories.
wondering what impact we had. That's quite humbling.
It is. So on that note, it's time to say goodbye to Jane Shone, but not before thanking her for the inspiration she's given us.
Yes, thank you, Jane. And to our listeners, we hope this has, sparked your curiosity.
Explore your own family histories. You never know what hidden gems you might find.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.